Good afternoon, everyone. This is an interview in the middle of the rainforest of the Cuyabeno Reserve with a very important person for us, for the Cuyabeno area, the protected areas of the country and the reserve, who's going to talk us about the history of Cuyabeno, which is very important for us, the newer generations, to know about this beautiful place in Ecuador. That is a great place of rainforest to see and to live. This is our person. His name is Dan from the Netherlands.
Dan Vreugdenhil, and I have been working together with Ecuador for 50 years on conservation. I started out in 1974 and I continue to be in contact with Ecuador on conservation. When I started in the country, I was part of a team of the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, with the mission to find protected areas for Ecuador. When we started, my boss Alan Putney and I, the Ecuador had only two protected areas. That was Galapagos National Park and Cotopaxi National Park. So there was really nothing on other protected areas. During that time, we had to explore the country and see what was there, get to know nature, get to know the culture, so that we could make proper recommendations on conservation in Ecuador. My boss Alan Putney worked in the Andes and the coast, and I worked to get to know the Amazon region. At the time, in 1974, oil exploitation had just started in the country, and there was really still very little infrastructure. There was a road from Quito to, it was a dirt road from Quito to a little town called Lago Agrio, and that was about it in the northern part of the country. All the rest of Ecuador was in a virgin state of forests. The entire Amazon region was one single Amazon rainforest, and there were a number of tribes, and there was a process that we'll explain a little bit later. You can.
Yeah, very interesting to know the beginning of the Cuyabeno Wildlife Reserve in the area of Ecuador. The time when everything was harder to come here, very few people knew about this area. I'm sure the people that you met before were people of the old time of indigenous tribes. What are the first people you start to see in places like Cuyabeno or Yasuni areas of today here?
Yes, it was an interesting period because there already was some infrastructure with small airplanes. They were called STOL airplanes, short takeoff and landing airplanes, owned by the missionary group Instituto Lingüístico de Verano, or the Linguist Institute, an organization from the United States that tried or worked with indigenous people on bringing their beliefs on their religion. I was not part of that, but the institute had a very effective infrastructure which I could use to get to different places where nobody else could go, with the with the small airplanes that could take off and land on the size of an American football field. So it were very efficient airplanes, and that way I could explore a part of the country. So in the beginning, my boss and I started traveling the country by four-wheel drive vehicles as far as we could go. That wasn't very far in the Amazon region of Ecuador. that basically was as far as Lago Agrio, and then the world ended. From there, uh, we hired canoes for exploring the river, the different rivers, because uh, that was the only way with transportation for people that didn't have an airplane to get around. The first place that I went to was to an area that is called Cuyabeno. Uh, I entered the Cuyabeno from the mouth of the river and went upstream, and at a certain moment I found a village called Puerto Montúfar, where the Shona tribe lived. And I had the first contact with a gentleman, an Indian elder called Victoriano, and since that time I've had contact with this group of people who were very friendly. They hosted me in their homes, and they helped me explore the region which we now call Cuyabeno and the Cuyabeno Lake. I didn't only go there. I went around through other rivers, a river called the Aguarico, and from there I ended up in another river which was called the Napo, and explored all the areas in this northern part of the country. When I was on the Napo River, it was interesting to see that at the time all the forest along the Napo River was completely cut down, and a number of large landowners were having large groups of cattle. So they were raising cattle, and the entire border area, limit area, as far as the eye could see along the Napo River was cattle raising land. Uh, Traveling 50 years later in time, I was back on the Napo River about 5 years ago, and I discovered a very interesting thing. There were no longer cows along the Napo River, and a secondary forest had grown back because of the fact that it was too expensive to export, bring the products of meat and milk to the towns of Quito and Guayaquil, and basically the whole industry of cattle raising had died away, and the forest had come back, to my own great surprise. Let's cut it off here for a second,
Yeah. No. Yeah. Definitely.
and then we continue.